Kyle, if you want to go ahead and pull up the main deck, that would be fantastic. All right, I saw somebody said hello from sunny Colorado. Was that it? Yeah, I bet the leaves are
Colorful
beautiful out
Colorado.
there. All right. All right, hello everyone. If you are in the right place, if you're here for Empowering Women of Color, it is a two-part session that we're going to do here in the Family Echo Autism series, and we're super excited. We have a great team here. I think you're going to love to meet all of them. We've got some video embedded today, so it's going to be part of our case presentation. So I'm really excited to get this underway. All right, next slide. Again, welcome to where from wherever you are. I know when I was looking through the registrations today, we've got people that registered from Australia and Gabon and Canada and South Africa and California and Ohio. And we want to do a big shout out to our anybody in Florida who is here today because we know you're under a hurricane conditions. So be safe. And if you miss part of this or you lose your Wi-Fi, we're going to record it and get it to you later. So be safe wherever you are in the world. All right, next slide. So typically what we do is we're going to do a quick overview of what Echo Autism is. I'm going to have you meet the team. We're going to get into our presenter so you can meet our presentation so you can meet our presenters. We do have poll questions and we really like you to fill those out so that it, again, informs what we're doing so we can continue to offer what you want to see in the series. If you have any technical issues, audio, visual, chat, anything like that, just reach out to anybody on our support team. You'll see support listed by their name when you look at participants, and we're happy to help. All right, next slide. One of the other things that we like to say is, we all have protected health information. You may have heard it referred to as PHI. It is basically your child's name, school they may go to, the city you live in, your provider's name, things like that. We really want you to keep that private. If you need to ask a question, again, just don't say, my son, John needs this and we live in Columbus, those kinds of things. So just keep that private as much as you can. Also, keep yourself on mute so that we can really mitigate that background noise. All right, next slide. The other thing that we do is just remember we're all at different points in our autism journey. I know that when my son was young, I had lots of questions that were really more focused on treatment and school and things like that. Now that he's a little bit older, and he's actually a young adult now, my questions have kind of changed, and the things that I need are a little bit different. So just again, be respectful of everyone's point of their journey and where it is. Keep the chats within the topic of today. Keep them positive, share resources that have been successful for you. And remember, every child's pathway is really unique. So we always want to say, work with your medical and your treatment team to help so that you can define next steps and best practices for your child. And if you are a provider, this is not a place to solicit for business. So please do not do that. All right, next slide. Again, we wanted to thank the Autism Care Network. They are a sponsor of the series, and it's the way that we're able to offer it. They help to support what we do here. So a big shout out to the Autism Care Network. And we have a link actually. So if you want to learn more about them, you can go to their website and look for more information there. All right, next slide. So a little bit about Family Echo Autism. The reason that the series really started is because we realized that we have all of this medical and behavioral information that we kind of have in the clinic, and you're going to meet the professionals who are really well versed and work with thousands of families. But what we wanted to do is really get all of that information out of the clinic and out of like the little, behind the doors and get it into the hands of families and parents like me, and like you. And we wanted to share that information and really talk about the number of different team members that you might work with. In the clinic world, it's called like multidisciplinary perspective. So like in my own life, I work with, occupational therapy and speech therapy, and I have two different kinds of medical providers that I've worked with, on and off over the years. And I've had psychologists that I've worked with, and being the parent of a child with autism, I didn't realize that there were all these different disciplines that could potentially be a part of my life, in addition to the school that I was working with and those kinds of things. So we really want to talk about that in this series so that you get a great understanding of what these disciplines do, how you interact with them, and also the role that you have as that care team leader who shares that information across all of these different people that you might come into contact, or how to start to share all of that. So that's really the premise of this series. So we're excited to share more of that with you today. All right, next slide. One of the ways we do this is that we follow the Project Echo model. And really what the Echo model is, it's about talking about how we can get, information into your hands, regardless of where you live, regardless of geography. But we want to make sure that we're reaching people equally and equitably, because it's one of the things that we found in healthcare is that we can't get information out in a really equal and equitable fashion. So that's one thing that we're doing. And that's why we're going to follow this model. Next slide. And on the next slide, I think what you'll see too is that we're trying to do this so that we look at ages and stages and address it as we have content, and we look at diversity and we address that with the content and abilities and supports that individuals need, because we really want what we talk about today to reflect the people who are coming to the session, the families that are coming into the clinic, and the children that need that care and treatment. So we're really trying to make sure that we look at this from a very holistic, robust perspective. All right, next slide. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to introduce everybody. So let me first say, my name is Amy Hess. I'm here at Nationwide Children's Hospital. I am the parent of a child with autism who you'll hear me talk about on occasion if you come to any of our other sessions. But I want to have you meet our really amazing team, and I'm going to throw it over to Lisa Nowinski.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Nowinski, and I'm a clinical neuropsychologist and the clinical director at the Massachusetts General Hospital Lurie Center for Autism, just outside of Boston. And unfortunately, Hannah Barton couldn't be here with us today, but I know Amanda Bennett is, so I'll pass it to Amanda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Bennett. I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Always love working with this hub team and really excited about this topic today. Is Ellen on the call?
Ellen is not with us today, so I think we're going to go next to Mary.
Thanks.
Hello, I am Mary Wojnarowski. I'm a clinical psychologist at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. And I work at our Child Development Center where we see kids with autism and other developmental differences.
Shalonda?
Hi, my name is Shalonda. I'm also a psychologist at Nationwide Children's Hospital, the Child Development Center, and I am a family member of an autistic individual as well.
All right, Sabrina.
Yep, I am Sabrina Long. I'm a clinical social worker here at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Excited to be here with all of you today. I will pass it on to Nellie.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nellie Valentine, and I am a parent partner of with the Center for Autism, UCI, in Irvine, California. And I am mom to 4 neurodivergent children, and I'm really happy to be here.
Good afternoon. I'm Maureen Dillon. Good afternoon. I'm Maureen Dillon, and I'm a clinical social worker at the Center for Autism at UCI in California, and I support the Empowering Women of Color program.
All right, Angie, are you there?
I am here. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Angie Fideli. I'm the Director for Clinical Programs in Autism Speaks Science Department, as well as the leader of the Autism Care Network. We're really excited that you all could join us today. This is such an important topic. We hope we are able to share a lot of knowledge with you during today's session and the next session to empower you all. And I know Amy will share this at a later point, but please stay with us because we hope to continue this series in early 2025 as well and expand on the information we're sharing. I will pass this over to Janelle.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Janelle Morrissey. I am the manager of the Autism Response Team at Autism Speaks. We're an information and resource referral line. So I'm here to help answer questions and share resources in the chat, or please feel free to reach out to us. The email will be in the chat, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
All right. And then Anwaisha, do you want to just say hi from the support team and tell them what you do and how you can be contacted if they need help?
So hi, everyone. My name is Anwaisha. Myself, along with Michaela, Nick, and Kyle, are your ECHO support team members. please feel free to just send us a direct message or reach out using the ATN email address that you all have. If you have any issues technologically or any questions that may arise, we'll be here. We'll be monitoring the chat. We'll be making sure you guys are taken care of. And as it's been previously mentioned, the sessions will be recorded. You will have access to them after our team presents here today. But yes, feel free to reach out through direct messaging or through the email.
Great, thank you so much. All right, and next slide. I think the thing that's really exciting is that we have a host of women of color who are going to be part of this team, and you're going to meet many of them during some of the videos that we're going to show today. So big welcome to them. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, sharing your stories. I think it's going to be super powerful and a great part of this presentation. Go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Nellie and Maureen for our session today. Nellie, Maureen, take it away.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are thrilled to be here presenting about the Empowering Women of Color group that we started at UCI Center for Autism about 2 years ago, or a little over that. And I will, next slide, please. And I want to introduce you to my family. 23 years ago, my son with autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disability was 5 years old. Because of his disruptive behavior, he was placed on the sidewalk outside his kindergarten class every day. No one discussed this decision with me from the school. However, I was told about it by a PTA mom who volunteered every day. After a lengthy and deliberative process, which included the regional center attorneys, my son won in arbitration and was assigned a one-on-one aide with him every day through the 8th grade. When my neurodivergent daughter was in middle school, she was mercilessly bullied by a boy. She would cry inconsolably. I could only hug my girl. A year later, when she was on Facebook, I heard her scream. The young man who relentlessly bullied her was stabbed to death behind a convenience store. This time, she was inconsolable with guilt. She told me she used to wish he was dead. My daughter is now 29 years old. Last semester in her college, her professor locked her out of the class because she returned late from a break. She was nervous as she was making a presentation after the break with 2 other students. My daughter kept knocking on the door and texting her peers to open the door, but they told her the professor said no. The professor had given my daughter several warnings. My daughter was humiliated from the shame of being made an example and destroyed because she knew she had failed a class. Discrimination is complex. It can be blatant, implicit, or otherwise. The incidents with my son in kindergarten and my daughter in college continue to mar my view, and it amplifies my demands for fairness and equity. There is nothing that debilitates a parent more than seeing their child being mistreated. Racism is real. So often, instead of empathy and understanding, people of color constantly have to work harder to ensure that they are given equal and equitable treatment and opportunities. We begin to believe that we are less than. Racism shatters our self-esteem, especially when we see it taking place in so many aspects of our lives. My name is Nellie Valentine. I'm a very proud parent partner with UCI Center for Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders and our DDS grant. I started the Empowering Women of Color group to create a space where women of color felt safe to gather, to share experiences about their neurodivergent loved ones, where they could develop strategies, they could learn to sharpen skills, and be galvanized to access their own power and unapologetically become vigorous advocates and take their seat at the table. Next slide. We noted from the registration data that a large number of people of color are attending this workshop or registered for it. We want you to know that we see you, we hear you, and throughout this conversation, we hope you leave with great takeaways that can propel your journey to advocacy. And we want to thank our host for allowing this opportunity to speak with you. Next slide. Destiny?
Hi, everyone. My name is Destiny. I'm a medical student at UCI, and I'm also with Empowering Women of Color and the Center for Autism. And I'm just going to be reading this excerpt from a poem called We Rise by Amanda Gorman to kind of set the tone for today's session. So the poem reads, "Today, everyone's eyes are on us as we rise. Today is the day women are paving the way, speaking our truth to power. In this hour, it is our duty to find the brave beauty in rooting for other women so they too know we are not victims. We are victors, the greatest predictors of progress. We press for change, a new dawn drawn into the open by women whose silence is broken. We push on and act on our responsibility to bring visibility to the most vulnerable, to bring freedom to those who didn't have a choice, to bring volume to those who are using their voice. We clear a woman's way. We don't fear the day she steps into the light because we are with her every step of the fight. There's a lot at stake, but making a difference always takes great courage. So we encourage women who dare to stare fear square in its face, women who have always shown that when one woman stands up, she is never alone."
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Destiny. I'm Maureen Dillon, and I'm a clinical social worker at the Center for Autism at UCI. Next slide. I want to start by just covering a couple of important definitions because you're going to hear these words today. So health equity is a state in which everyone has a fair opportunity to attain their highest level of health. Achieving this requires focused efforts. We can't just wait for it to happen. We cannot keep doing things the same way we've always done them. We have to make efforts to overcome economic, social, and other obstacles to health and healthcare. Health disparities are preventable. They are differences in the burden of diseases or injuries experienced by populations that have been disadvantaged by their social or economic status, geographic location, and environment. These are from the Centers for Disease Control. Next slide. Here's a visual to help illustrate how equity is different from equality. Equality is on the left. Everyone has the same curb. Equity is on the right. There are efforts, in this case, physical changes, put into place to make crossing the street safer and more accessible for everyone. Next slide. For parents joining us today, thank you for being here. You're going to hear us call out some action steps we think you might be able to take. Here's one to start with. Share the equality versus the equity picture. This is what we're talking about today. Next slide. So we're from the Center for Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders, which is part of UCI Health based out of Irvine, California. We provide care for patients, training for providers and students like Destiny and other med students joining us today. We work on clinical research as such through the Autism Care Network, and we do community education and outreach like you're hearing about today. Next slide. This is a picture of some of our parent partners who are parents of patients that collaborate with us to improve care and develop educational workshops. We've been working with some of these parents going back 10 years, and we're incredibly grateful for them. Next. With these parent partners, we started applying for some grants through the state of California Department of Developmental Services. The grants were to address gaps or disparities that our state agencies had gathered and reported. As an example, a white child with a developmental disability would get on average about $8,000 a year in services from our local regional center, while a Hispanic child would get $3,400 a year in services, and an African American child would get $5,400 a year in services. For the record, families of color are not saying, "Oh, our kids don't need services, we're good." To the contrary, the service system is not equitable. It is not designed or delivered in a way that works well for the families. It's like the curb in the picture I showed you earlier. It has no modifications. Next slide. We started doing educational and outreach events for Spanish-speaking families along with our parent partners, including Nellie, who you've heard from, and Berlina, who's joining us today, and you'll hear her story later. We had great turnouts for in-person events, and Spanish-speaking families provided very positive feedback. Then you'll see the first major change that happened to our team was the COVID-19 pandemic, which is the little picture on the slide. And now we'll show you a brief clip from a video created by our lead ABC scholars at UCI. Next slide. There you go.
The revolution has come. Out the line. You won't put down the gun. Out the line. Revolution has come. Out the line. You won't put down the gun. Out the line. Revolution has come. Out the line. You won't put down the gun. Out the line. Revolution has come. Out the line. You won't put down the gun. Out the line.
Across the United States, not only in Minneapolis last night. So here is a look right now at the sights and scenes from across the United States.
Take your knees off my neck.
We will not stop until we see change.
No justice. No peace. Transform.
Next slide. It was the summer of 2020. Our small but mighty team thought, what can we do? You guys will get access to these slides. I encourage you to watch the remaining 12 minutes of that video. It's incredibly powerful. We are small. The Black population in Orange County is overlooked. It's about 2% of the total population. But to work toward health equity, going back to that picture of the curb we showed earlier, means we have to make a focused effort. We can't just wait for someone else to do something or someone else to make change. So we gathered people who are in this session today, and we made a plan to start by listening. Next slide. In collaboration with our lead ABC scholars at UCI, who you'll be meeting more in session 2, we had a listening sessions for families. Next slide. Parents, if there is an opportunity to participate in or ask for a listening session, consider participating, consider asking. Next slide. Here is a list of barriers that families shared. Also, our state grant program has shared a similar list, and all of these barriers are well researched. Next slide. You'll be getting an email after this session with resources, including a list of over 15 articles specifically about barriers that African American, Black, and families of color experience in navigating care for children with autism. Next slide. And a parent action step you can take is looking at any of those articles that might interest you, or sharing the list of articles, including with your child's doctor or clinic or teacher, because sometimes families feel very alone and they might feel like they're doing something wrong because the path you get to get help for your child is so full of obstacles. We want families to know we see you. You are not alone. You are not doing something wrong. You are here, and we are so glad that you are here. The barriers you're having are not because you're doing something wrong. The barriers are because the systems you have to navigate are not equitable, and we have to keep working together to help one another and also make changes. Next slide. Now you'll hear more about barriers through the stories of women from our Empowering Women of Color group. As you listen to these stories, please put barriers you hear in the chat. Please note any action steps that you heard them take in the chat. Next slide.
Unfortunately, people of color already face barriers and discrimination based off of the color of their skin. We are underappreciated in so many ways, and to add that we also are human and may have mental disorders and educational disorders is something that apparently is unheard of. They seem to think that all we need is proper discipline, a rigorous routine, and punishment. This will help bring any African American individual up to a modern American par, especially the boys, as they're seen as wild, unruly, and a danger to society. As a parent to a Black child with autism, I live through fear each and every day. Fear that people won't see and understand the boy that I get to see and cherish. When he's in his moments of distress, meltdowns can be quite moving. And if people are not aware of his diagnosis, they assume that he's just a bad kid. In fact, people who don't even know him, they'll just see him and think that he's 9 or 10, when in reality, he's only 6 years old. He's just super tall. Unfortunately, society already views people of color as loud, unteachable, and ghetto. Regardless of the many achievements we continue to accomplish each and every day, our moments of just being human are demonized and perceived as needing harsh discipline or even institutionalization. Boys are already deemed rough, but little Black boys, they're seen as weapons of mass destruction. As we all know, autism is a spectrum, and within this, each person has their own traits. Because there's not a typical look to autism, everyone perceives my child as neurotypical, and they expect him to behave just as every other child. But when they see that he doesn't, they immediately think that he needs to be punished just for his way of perception. Not only is this wrong for any neurodivergent child, but this is wrong for any child in general. It's important that we as the parents who know that our children have these diagnoses speak up and educate as many people as possible. The more that we speak on our children, the more we can bring awareness to such a taboo thing as mental health. It's important that our generation help end the stigma so that we are able to educate others into getting assessments, asking questions, and passing on knowledge to others. And this will always, always, always help our community grow from within.
As a mother of color to a daughter of mixed race, my family and I have encountered a troubling reality. When we raised concerns about our daughter's speech development at her 15 and 18-month checkup, our pediatrician dismissed our worries, assuring us that her speech would eventually come. This reassurance, though possibly well-meaning, did not address our valid concerns. Here I was fighting medical experts on something I knew wasn't right. Something was off with my daughter and no one was listening to me. Based on comments from our extended family, I knew I had to keep our journey to myself because sharing any concerns or information about what we were experiencing was just going to be met with, well, it's because you aren't disciplining her correctly. I'm incredibly grateful my husband and I were on the same page and were each other's support system through everything. Without even really knowing what it was, we thankfully were able to receive early intervention services. Having a special needs child is an incredibly isolating journey, even more so if no one in your community has experience with it. When you're met with resistance from your family and friends and feel like you've hit a wall with various medical experts, you start to question yourself. It feels like you're in a nightmare where you want to scream, but you have no voice. This experience is part of a larger, troubling pattern that many families face. As a mother navigating this world with minimal guidance, I had to forge my own path. I sought resources, advocated fiercely, and fought tirelessly to ensure my daughter received the support she is entitled to. This journey often left me pouring from an empty cup, battling not just for my daughter's needs, but also against the skepticism that accompanies my role as a parent of color. This struggle speaks volumes about the broader systemic challenges we face. It's not just about my daughter's development, it's about the urgent need for equitable and culturally competent support. When parents are dismissed or their concerns invalidated, it not only delays crucial interventions, but also undermines the well-being of entire families.
Next. Thank you. So some questions that we're seeing lots of great comments and questions and ideas in the chat. Please keep thinking about of this. Think about what you can relate to. I've already seen a lot of comments where folks are relating to what they've heard. Think about what's moving you and what are you curious about. Next slide. Turning this back over to Nellie.
Thank you, Maureen. After spending some time working with these women, I realized that they were extremely overwhelmed and exhausted. And I certainly recognized that feeling. I knew that in order for them to become warriors, they first needed to become empowered. So I set out to change their impression of participation, to shift their perspective on learning, and to embolden their voices. You cannot do more when you don't know what to do. You can only do more when you know more. A future goal with this group was advocacy. But first, we needed to get them engaged. So we attended the leadership training workshops, and one of them, next slide, was Family Echo. And the Family Echo Journal was a place they would not have visited on their own because of the demands of that class. Not only did we attend the workshop, but we met monthly to discuss and dissect the contents of the workshop so that we could understand better and grow more. Next slide. We also attended the Family Voices Leadership Training. And it's a nationwide program, and we participated, as I had done several years ago, and found it empowering. And on the slides, we have the quotes from Shanae and Cecilia about their experience attending these advocacy workshops. Cecilia commented that she had acquired new tools, and Shanae thought it was great training. Next slide, please. So once again, we encourage you to take actions as parents and to look at what you can accomplish by participating in learning. One thing that we know you already do is showing up. So keep showing up. As parents, you are the experts on your children. So have confidence in that knowledge. Don't let anyone tell you they know your child better than you do. Next, you want to share information and always network. Next slide, please. And so we'll have the opportunity to look at another video. Once again, please listen and make your notes in the chat on any actions that you heard them take and anything that you find relatable. Next slide, please.
I have a son who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. Our journey as a Latino family has not been an easy one. Starting with when we got the diagnosis, my family didn't understand. My parents, being Mexicans, couldn't understand what autism is. For my father, autism is just a name a doctor wanted to give my son. After all, my son would be able to outgrow not being able to talk. In my dad's words, his bad behavior was because I am not being a strict mom. The stigma my parents had over autism wasn't the only barrier we had to face. I had to also translate to my husband everything our doctor was telling us about our son's diagnosis. There are not enough doctors in the Latino community who can speak Spanish for parents like my husband whose English is limited or in some cases non-existent. Our next step was start taking classes with third-person translator because all classes were offered in English. With that, my husband wanted to be able to ask his own questions during the classes provided. One of the biggest struggles for us has been language barriers. My husband's primary language is Spanish, and when classes are offered in his native language, he can understand a bit better, but even then, it's hard to understand because of all the terms being used. For a person who just went to school until 6th grade, it's hard to understand and still need more explanation over certain medical terms. It's the same across the board. Therapies are offered mainly in English, and at times it's hard for parents to communicate with their therapist. Many companies have one or two people who can provide therapy and speak Spanish. There are many struggles that the Latino community must face on a day-to-day basis to get the proper help for their children.
Navigating the world of services for my son, who is on the spectrum, has been incredibly challenging and disheartening. The process of getting him assessed for autism took almost a year, and that was just the beginning of the struggle. Once the assessment was finally done, finding therapy services that accepted my insurance added another layer of frustration. Many times I felt like I kept hitting dead ends with our insurance, which offered very limited options for providers that accepted our plan. We are currently paying out of pocket for his occupational therapy sessions because we're still on a waiting list for an assessment. I'm also aware that even after the assessment, there will likely be another waiting list before he can start therapy. Interacting with services providers has been challenging as well. During one of my son's therapy assessment, I felt judged, not just about my son's need, but also about my ability as a mother. The assessor's facial expressions, body language, and tone suggested that my explanations were an indication of my limitations as a parent and my failure to teach my son necessary skills. After voicing my concerns about my son, she recommended that my son did not need therapy. I felt completely defeated. This assessor came into my home, didn't like something about my family, and concluded that my son didn't need services. Eventually, I requested a new assessor, and this time we felt heard. The new assessor immediately recognized that my son did need therapy and took the necessary steps to facilitate his treatment.
Next slide, please. So we will constantly be discussing key takeaways and opportunities for you to replicate what we are doing, what we do as care team leaders. Berlina is a boss. I've known her for maybe about 12 years when we started with the Family Advisory Committee with UCI, and we were both volunteers. But I've watched her learn, absorbing all the material she can about the diagnoses. And once again, that's why we participated in the family journal. And then she learned to navigate, work around the barriers for her language, balance work and family,
Awesome, thank you.
Support her husband and her father, and work on that lived experience to address the stigmas. Next slide, please. And the same with Elsa. She mitigated the challenges directly. She advocated for fairness. When she was turned down by one company, she went and looked at another and communicated the services that she felt her family needed. And those are things that we can do, we learn to do as we're being mentored by a group or some individuals, and also participation. These workshops are critical. These family echoes can teach you so much. Next slide, please. And so we'll ask you again, as you are looking at this, the final and upcoming slide, you know, what can you relate to? Please put in the chat that what you've heard from Berlina and from Elsa. And what moves you? What are you curious about? What stigmas do you observe in your journey? Next slide, please. And our final video will be of Aruna and Nedra. Next slide, please.
Isha has developmental delay, and I have been taking her to a lot of therapies, attending various webinars, and learning how to self-advocacy for my child. Being a South Asian Indian, I come from a different cultural background and also a first-generation immigrant who came to work in United States. Isha was born in Newport Beach, California, who walked very late, went to early intervention program when she was 2.5 years old, and then to ECLC. From there, she was directed to California Children's Services, where Isha was learned how to walk or climb stairs without falling down or getting hurt herself. Isha continued her education until high school in Irvine. Of all these years, it was cerebral palsy, ataxic cerebral palsy, developmental delay, and during COVID-19, Isha was diagnosed with autism from UCI Health. From preschool until high school, we had no knowledge about the services provided by Regional Center of Orange County. Now Isha is in adult transition program. I'm getting more knowledge and learning about the more services provided by the Regional Center of Orange County. It's taking too long for Isha to get into self-determination program, which I attended in October 2023. If Isha had gotten all these services before, Isha would have been in a better place today.
My name is Nedra. I am here speaking on behalf of my children. I have 4. I am a mom of 4, 2 sets of twins. My youngest set of twins, they're both on the spectrum. Their disability ranges from high functioning to severe and other IDDs. It has been a very long journey, and I anticipate more twists and turns to come as they envelope and evolve into themselves in life. Schools just have like really inadequate supports for our children. These are just a few of the things that give me a pause, trying to figure out like what's happening here. And it can be very triggering and exhausting, but this is an aspect that I am willing to walk through to get what I need for my children. For instance, it's been pulling teeth to get my kid a one-on-one aid on the bus. It is something that has been in place for him since middle school, or even before middle school. And now that he's in high school, it's a problem. And so he periodically have outbursts and behaviors and throw and, whatever the case may be. And so I'm aiming to just have these preventative measures in place to avoid anything disastrous in the future. But I'm not sure if the urgency of this situation is pressing enough. And, I can't overstate enough how important it is that he has this aid with him, because I am trying to avoid disasters in the future. I'm really eager to understand if the district really shares my concerns. However, I am not navigating this journey by myself, and I'm actually seeking legal support and other supports from different entities. This is not a battle I can fight single-handedly, but it is one that I'm willing to journey through to get what my kid needs.
Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you, Aruna and Nedra. Our care team leaders, our moms, we evolve over time and understand the huge and critical requirements that are being made of us, and the demands that not only at home with our families, but also with navigating the challenges at schools and in our medical appointments in the community. So our training at Family Voices was really important and critical. And our friends at Family Voices invited us to join them at Disco at the Capitol. This is California's most prominent in-person event for disabilities rights movement. It advocates for disability rights and includes several organizations. We converged in Sacramento, our state capital, to protest the removal of $1 billion in funding for persons with disabilities for our budget. Our women of color were happy to join this movement. Next slide, please. Nedra commented after she came home and wrote an amazing blog. Why was I there? The cuts were $1 billion, a colossal imposition directly affecting my family. I cannot wait for new issues to arise because now I have been equipped with the tools to face and express to the state and local legislators how cuts affect my family and others in dire need of services. Just imagine all of us, how many of us walk into the office of a legislator and just really rail against the $1 billion cut. Knowledge is powerful. It is the most effective antidote. And we, as empowering women of color and all women of neurodivergent children, must be able to cash in and utilize the skills that we learn, the tools that we are given, and know that we have the power to do this work for our family and for our children. Next slide, please. So once again, we ask you to go into the chat and let us know, what can you do? What do you think you could do? What steps can you take? One step. Let us know one step you feel you can take. What can we do? And can you share something that is working for you? And while you're doing that, I want to pass, next slide, please. I want to pass the mic over to Cecilia, who will share, we're featuring all of our empowering women of color on our the next part 2 of this series. And we want Cecilia to share some of her thoughts with you. Go ahead, Cecilia.
Thank you. I will say that in my 7-year autism journey, it feels like a lot has happened, and yet also that it's just beginning. I'm really grateful to have found this Empowering Women of Color group. I've been incredibly supported and have been granted opportunities that I didn't even know were available. I was just on this mission to find support for my daughter, and that's why I get involved in every possible thing I can find. So I've been my daughter's room parent at school for years, and I joined the PTA and the special education PTA, and I volunteer at whatever I can fit into my work schedule to really make sure that school activities are inclusive for our kids. I sign my daughter up for a variety of activities. She plays sports in a special needs sports league, and she runs in the marathon club at her school, which is actually open for all students. And that also means that I run in the marathon club at her school. And in every activity that we do, I talk with all the parents and I share as many resources as I can that's applicable to their child. I've been able to help families advocate with the school, with the regional center, which I know is specific to the state of California, and sign up for classes and activities that are tailored to kids with our, specific needs. And so because of this, I've just kind of quickly become a resource to other parents. And now at my daughter's soccer games, parents will drag their folding chairs over to me to ask questions about things. And I just take so much pride in being able to help other families in a way that I wish I'd had when my family was just starting on our autism journey.
Next slide, please. So what are some takeaways? First and foremost, you are not alone. We encourage you to participate, show up, take a seat at the table, bring your folding chair, learn, build on your knowledge, network with others, share information, advocate, and encourage families to learn and share, much like Cecilia described earlier. Thank you, Cecilia. Next slide, please. I will ask Lee to read this poem, much like we started the workshop reading a poem. When I saw this poem, just totally appeared. I was not looking for it, but it spoke of when you have unexpected joy. So often in our journey, it is so challenging and we're so exhausted, but then our kids just do something incredible and we're so awfully proud and excited. And I want to encourage you to look at their resilience and take some of it for yourself. And also celebrate when that happens. Go ahead, Lee.
A point of view resilience. Celebrate your wins. Don't Hesitate by Mary Oliver. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed are about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibilities left. Perhaps this is its ways of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in an instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Don't hesitate.
Thank you, Lee. Great, great, great message. Next slide, please. So we invite you to look at the learning loop once again and remember to participate, learn, and share. Next slide, please. We are all care team leaders. You are partners in care. You're not less than, you're not instead of, you are a partner in the care of your child. So advocate, share, engage, learn opportunities, and learn and share your learning. This is how we will accomplish the goal of becoming powerful advocates, but more importantly, keeping our children on the trajectory of wins. Next slide, please. So we want to share with you that in our next session in part 2, you will meet Dr. Taylor Lucas, who is the head of the Lead ABC Scholars, among many other acclaimed titles she holds. You will also meet our Lead ABC Scholars, Destiny and Tolua. You'll hear from our women of color, and we'll discuss several happenings and opportunities that we are working toward. And you'll have a case presentation of an African-American boy and hear the challenges and wins that his family has experienced. And we'll also give you more takeaways as always. Next slide, please. So we've said a lot, and we know you have a lot to absorb, and we will be happy to discuss your questions and comments shortly. But if you leave today and you might have some questions that you want to ask of us, please feel free to reach out. As Amy mentioned earlier, the hub team of this ECHO, you can reach them and they have given you their information. And if you have specific questions about empowering women of color, please feel free to contact Maureen, Dillon, or myself, and we'll be happy to answer your questions as well. Next slide, please. And I will pass it over to Amy.
We can dive right into questions. This is Lisa Nowinski. Nellie, thank you so much. And Maureen, and to all of our hub team members with the Empowering Women of Color group, we so appreciate your presentations today. And I'm very excited for session 2 to come up. So thank you for sort of previewing that. We've got some great time for questions today, and I've collected a few of those throughout the chat, but please think about other questions that you may have. You're welcome to raise your hand or drop them into the chat. to start us off, I would love to circle back to one of the questions that was sort of fluttering around the chat early on. And I'm going to ask our hub team members, Dr. Joyner and Dr. Osen, to weigh in here. We had several comments talking about different disruptive behavior disorders like oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. And I wonder if you all can comment on what we can do in some ways to stop the discriminatory use of those labels, and maybe help us understand when those labels have a place in clinical care and when they might be used inappropriately. So I'll invite either one of you to jump in and offer some of your thoughts.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Joyner. I'm part of UCI Center for Autism. And so I guess, will you ask the main part of the question again? Just
yes,
how we stop the labels?
I think it's sort of twofold, right? Certainly one of the questions was how do we just stop or sort of advocate against the discriminatory use of those labels? But maybe even more broadly, if you can help us understand when parents might understand if or when those labels could be used appropriately versus inappropriately, right? How do we know when we're hearing those things tossed around, how to make sense of it and what to do?
Yeah, I think those are tough labels. I think labels in general are hard for parents to hear. I think labels are helping to create understanding, but I think for me as a clinical psychologist, what I would try to offer for parents and other clinicians who are making these diagnoses is first really understanding the context in which behaviors are occurring. So knowing what is this behavior communicating? And I think so often for children with autism spectrum disorder and other neurodevelopmental disorders, we're not thinking of it in a developmental context. So parents come in and it's my 6-year-old who's, maybe tall, and now we're already overestimating their skill set, but we're not even thinking like, yes, well, developmentally or chronologically they're 6, but developmentally, maybe they're 2, in terms of skill set. And I think really just making sure we're framing things as clinicians and for parents to really to give clinicians that understanding of what the developmental history is and what the context in which the behaviors are occurring. And I think then that can help to lead to more accurate diagnoses that might create a better understanding of that individual. So I don't know if Dr. Ocean would add to that or.
Hi, yeah. I think just to follow along with what Dr. Joyner was mentioning is I would really encourage parents to seek full evaluation. So Dr. Joyner was mentioning understanding the child's behavior in context, their chronological age versus their developmental age. For some families, they may receive a diagnosis of autism through like a pediatrician. There's a lot of channels to receiving a diagnosis. Some children may have full evaluations where they have developmental testing, adaptive skills testing, behavioral and socio-emotional functioning. So you have a broad range of information about your child and where they are along certain domains. And some may have a diagnosis from, a 30-minute consultation with a medical provider. So I think if there's questions about what is the correct diagnosis, it might be, getting a full evaluation and pulling information from a lot of different sources. I know the full evaluation, sometimes there can be long waits, but if you can pull information from, like, let's say your IEP, because with the IEP, they do, multidisciplinary evaluations. And a lot of times in your IEP meetings, they're more focused on like the services that are going to be offered as opposed to going through, this is the measure we gave and these were the findings. But if you can pull those, pull those resources together to try to have a full picture of the child. I think the second part of your question was, when might some of those other diagnoses be useful in addition to a diagnosis of autism or ADHD? For me, I provide additional diagnosis when it goes above and beyond kind of the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder or ADHD. When thinking about the chronological age, the developmental stage, in addition, if it really should be its own focus of, intervention. So so oppositional defiant disorder, I think many people don't love that diagnosis, but it's a behavioral description of a child who maybe has a pattern of being oppositional, trouble with, authority. So a lot of like non-compliance. And so if you think, well, we need a specific intervention related to, maybe being cooperative, maybe having less kind of disruptive behaviors, that might be when it might be in addition to it might be appropriate to have it as an additional diagnosis because, we know ADHD, neurodivergence, autism are spectrums, and not all children with autism are oppositional, you know? So it's when is it over and above that kind of neurodivergence, and it might require some additional explanation and its own support.
Really helpful answers. I think this is super helpful to give people more information to think about when we're facing some of these challenging labels. A couple of additional comments in the chat around sort of behavioral rigidity that's part of autism is being sort of misunderstood as defiance, which is, I think, really important. And I think, Vicki, you have some great comments you've added today as well. Particularly early on when you were talking about sort of recognizing unmet needs, right? That when we start to see what appear to be oppositional or sort of conduct related problems, they might actually reflect an under-supported or unmet need for a child that they need additional support, either skill building or support in their environment in order to sort of engage without challenging behaviors. We'll jump onto some additional questions here. We had several comments in the chat about sort of navigating differences in perspective and understanding across family systems, particularly extended family, when we think about receiving a diagnosis. One participant shared that, sort of dealing with their son's father's family, not believing that the child had an autism diagnosis when they were told about that, kind of seeing some of these things as simply a delay, not necessarily a developmental disorder or autism diagnosis. Would anyone on our hub team like to comment on that? Sort of, thoughts about how family members and primary caregivers can really support their extended family in truly understanding the child's diagnosis and needs.
I can jump in real quick. I know all of us have experienced it. I will say that, I had to deal with that with my dad thinking that she was going to grow out of it. And, that's not what it is. And I think what really helped, honestly, is Nellie just hammering it home with me. She just would always say, you are the expert on your child. And so, as much as I grew up as like a people pleaser and I do what my parents say, this is something, well, I'm a parent now. And so I need to stick up for my child. And, I could easily go about it in like a combative, aggressive, we're no longer talking way. But I think when I come from a place of compassion, it helps in the way it's received. And so, I just kind of eased them in because the way that I was sort of just tossed into the deep end is no way to be introduced to autism. And so, I would just like slowly share little things. And now, it helps because now my mom will call and she'll say, hey, I was looking at this shirt for your daughter. Do you think this is going to be soft enough? Or like there are just certain things now that they take into consideration. Whereas before it was just like, well, you need to teach them how to sit through this, or, and now they're like, hey, I brought this, this is a quiet, like fidget toy, maybe she could use this. So it's definitely it takes a lot of like courage on your end. And I feel like I could just hibernate for a week after sort of like sticking up for my daughter in the family setting. But I do think that when you kind of come from a place of compassion, but are also sort of firm, and this is my child, you can get a reaction that's hopefully helpful, and a lot of times I do think it takes repetition because I mean, it's been, I don't even know how many years, and I think my dad's finally come to terms with, this isn't just going away. So, yeah.
Such a helpful perspective to share. Does anyone else on the hub team want to share any thoughts on supporting extended family or finding a way to get support from your extended family? I wonder if our clinicians, any clinicians on the hub team might want to comment about how you as clinicians might be helpful in supporting family too. I know I personally love to extend an invitation to invite grandparents or aunts and uncles to participate in my sessions so that I can share some of that responsibility of educating extended family with a parent. But Nellie, I saw you unmuted. Do you have some thoughts to add?
Yes, I sure do. So my family had the same reaction and response, the stigma, don't discuss it in public. Why are you sharing this information about your kids? I have an annual newsletter and everything gets put in there. So, but I felt it was important to teach them and to let them understand. And I often tell them, if anything happens to me, these are your nephews and nieces, and I'd like to know that you're capable of supporting them and living in their world. So, so just constantly educating them. And a great story with this workshop, I was really busy and I didn't get a chance to invite them. So last night I sent an email to maybe about 15 members of my family saying, I'm participating in this workshop. You might learn a thing or two about autism if you're interested. And I got a text when I started to speak from about 8 or 9 of them saying, we really tried, but we couldn't get in because the class was closed. So I will email them tonight and say, well, sorry about that, but there's a recording. And if you want to listen to it, I'll be happy to find out how I could give it to you. Well, I was tickled that they're coming around, and it's just sharing information, being really open and not judging, just saying, this is the space we occupy, we're inviting you in. And then making sure we have substantive information to share with them as well. Well, he flaps his hand like this because he does that. And the final thing I'll share with this about my daughter, I took our complaint up to the dean of the college, because she wasn't coming back into the class because she was just afraid of the teacher and having issues, and even though she's extremely intelligent and could respond appropriately to all the questions regarding the subject matter, socially she was just a wreck. And she had an opportunity to have an aide, but she did not want to have an aide, and so she was trying to navigate this class on her own, and the teacher just misunderstood and misinterpreted all her rigidity and all her actions, and kept telling her, don't come back late to class. But my daughter was going in the bathroom and doing step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, as she does, because she's on the spectrum. So I spoke to the dean, and we had, it's in process, but I am working on educating them and letting them understand that, it would be important for you to be patient and to learn more about the students. And also, perhaps you were looking at her because she doesn't look like everyone else in your class, and you just thought this was a combative woman. So just educating everyone along the way is important. And I know the teacher is not family, but my daughter spends a lot of time with her as she was taking her class. Thank you.
Hi, this is Mary from Nationwide Children's. I'm a psychologist. I just want to, celebrate and affirm everything that's was just said. And I wanted to also make sure that I chimed in and said that I agree with Lisa's suggestion about inviting grandparents and other family members to feedbacks. I found that to be really helpful and powerful if they're able to come. And I always I don't ever want to make it seem like bring your, bring grandma in so I can yell at her or make her see your side. I really try to work hard to present it as a collaborative family discussion and an opportunity for them to ask their questions.
This is Amanda. I was just going to piggyback on what Mary just said. This is where I feel like having access to virtual visits has been really helpful, because a family who comes in and we talk about the diagnosis in person in that initial assessment, I will sometimes say to them, you know your child, you are empowered, you can go and talk to your family, but I also don't want you to feel like you have to explain this to other members of your family. If you want me to do that, we can set up a video call. It's really easy to add that on. And you can bring grandparents, aunts, uncles, your spouse, and let me be the one to explain this so that it's not all on your shoulders. So I try to offer that as often as I can.
Thank you, Mary and Amanda. Really important perspectives to hear. And I think all the providers on the call would agree with that. We're always happy to do that to support families and caregivers. We've got just a few minutes left for questions. And I think one of the other big themes that I saw in the chat this afternoon is really around the toll that it takes on primary caregivers, particularly mothers, to be constantly advocating. Sometimes it's a real battle. We've heard a lot of stories today where you've really had to fight and advocate to get your children what they need and to make sure that their needs are not misunderstood. How can parents, and I know some of these ideas have been tossed around the chat, so to our Hub team members, what ideas would you most want to highlight today in terms of how can parents find support for themselves to advocate effectively? And what can they do to combat the exhaustion from kind of constantly advocating? So lots of ideas have been thrown around the chat. I just want to give voice to our Hub team members to highlight the things that you think are most important for parents to know about how they can get help advocating and what they can do to combat exhaustion.
Can I chime in here?
Please do. Yes. Thanks, Nedra.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nedra. I think that what I have found to be very supportive in my own journey is just really asking questions, even if it's not the right questions. And sometimes you come across people that are willing to give you the information. So I feel like one of the things that parents can do, parents, caregivers, families, aunts, uncles, whoever you are, is just asking those questions. If you see something, ask a question. If you feel like you don't have sufficient information from that question, the internet is like a really wide open space for everybody to use. And so that can be another great resource as well. But also too, like going to groups. So maybe it's like you're coming here to our seminar that we're having today, and then coming again to our next seminar in about a week or two. And then just being able to get the resources from there is like a really great way to find what you might be looking for. And no question is a dumb question. You know, ask whatever you want to ask. And if you don't have that person that's going to give you the right answer, go to somebody else, because then down the line, you might find 10 people. And out of those 10 people, you might have 6 that might give you the resources that you're looking for. As far as like keeping your mental state in check, I mean, what I have found is just being mindful and being aware of your surroundings and how you're feeling in the moment, because a lot of information can be really overwhelming. And then you also have your loved one that, you know, have their own triggers or whatever it is. So everything can feel like they're coming at you all at once. It's really great to just take 5-10 minutes, if you have 20 minutes of your time, to just sit quietly with your own thoughts, be present in the moment, kind of just hit that reset button. Maybe you might want to inhale, exhale for a few times. Maybe you want to listen to something mindful, maybe a soft conversation, maybe it's a soft podcast, you know, whatever it is that makes you feel wrapped and enveloped in your comfort of like, okay, I feel reset now, let's face the world, let's try this again. So, I mean, that's my piece of advice I would give to any family, because I find that works for me, and I am not have a wide, vast knowledge of mindfulness as I just started learning about it. But knowing that information now, it's making my mental state and my parenting even so much more better, because I have those resources in my wheelhouse to help me as I navigate this crazy world.
Nedra, thank you so much for jumping in and sharing those thoughts. So important. We're going to come back to Leandra in just a minute. I'll give you a heads up, but we're going to launch the poll. On your screen, you're going to see a poll pop up here in just a minute. We really appreciate your feedback on this poll. So please give us your feedback on this satisfaction survey. There are 4 questions total, so it should be pretty quick for you to click through. It would really help us to get your perspective and feedback on today's session. And as you're filling out that poll, Leandra, would you like to unmute and add some additional comments there?
Well, just like Nedra stated, that resources is important. Networking also is important to see if they have respite, because you can actually get burned out with all the advocacy and all the appointments. And sometimes we lose ourselves into getting all the help and need for our children that we actually forget about ourselves. but take the time to have self-care for yourself too, at least an hour or 2 hours a day. That is so important, because you don't want to get burned out and you want to continue to have that clear mindset. And self-care, self-love, self-compassion, and self-indulgence is so important. As you become the best version of yourself, you can give your child the resources that they need to become the best version of themselves as well.
Such a good reminder. Thank you. We're just in the final minutes of our session today. If you haven't answered the poll questions again, we really value your perspective and would love to hear your feedback on today's session. Please take a moment to answer that question. And I'll pass it back to either Amy or the Hub team just to wrap us up for any final comments.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it. Go ahead and go to the next question or the next slide. Next slide. I think we're 2 up now because we missed the poll slide. Yep, go to the next one. A couple of things. Again, resources are going to come out to you. It's going to have some of the articles that Maureen referenced earlier in her discussion. Go to the next slide. And then we will also have a lot of the other things that Janelle's been dropping in as far as like toolkits and things like that. Those will also be included, and everything you see here will be here. And then on the final slide, I think, again, the next session is on October 23rd. It's part 2 of this series. Most of you are already registered. If you are not sure, you can go ahead and use that scan that barcode or scan that QR code there, or go ahead and reach out to us and we'll make sure that you get into the session. But I think most of you are already in it. So I want to say thank you to our presenters today, to Maureen, to Nellie. Thank you for sharing, to your incredible family support team that shared all of their videos. We've got so many great positive things in the chat. I think this has been a wonderful session. Fill out the surveys. Keep informing what you'd like to hear so that we can keep this momentum going and start to bring in more resources and strategies and techniques that you can
Can
actually.
you please share the previous slide?
Excuse me?
Can you please share that?
Yes. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, all of those are going to be in the resources that are going to get sent out. So we're at time. I don't want to keep you any longer than we need to. Again, thank you to our amazing hub who's been able to answer a lot of your questions and field a lot of your things in chat. And Angelina, I know you have your hand up, but you're on an iPhone, so I can't chat you directly. So again, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. We will see you in 2 weeks. And I hope you had a great time. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.